Hi, this is Dick Rochfort. Welcome to this brief discussion of the GTN 650 Garmin Cockpit Navigator. The 650 is the latest and greatest from the Garmin folks, and I think you're going to enjoy it. It has some distinct advantages over the prior products, the 430, 530 series, and so let's review. If we go to the home page, we'll find a variety of different selections here. The first of which is map. Map brings us, as the name implies, to the map page. And inside the map page we have a menu which will allow us to do a variety of setups and cluttering and decluttering. Very intuitive feature there. The next is the traffic page. This might be useful for a cockpit with a little bit of real estate. Most of the PA46 aircraft that I'm involved with have a multifunction display that will show us terrain and traffic and weather. But these things can be displayed here on the 650. The 750 is the same. This is the default nav page, or what I like to refer to as the number one nav page. If we were to press and hold the home key, it would bring us to this page. And just a point in passing, the CDI and the OBS buttons are here on this default nav and or home page, as the name may be. This is the only place you're going to find these buttons. CDI changes GPS to VLOC, thusly, and OBS will suspend or unsuspend Garmin and allow you to select a bearing to a particular station, thusly. Next, the flight plan page. Now this is generally where I'd be starting if I were flying a line flight. But having said that, we'll review that again in a minute. But here's where we would add waypoints, identifiers. We could do it two different ways. We can use these letters here, or we can use the knob on the lower right side. Some of us used to the 430s and 530s actually might prefer the knob. Procedure. This key is exactly the same as the 430 530 series. Obviously it's a different layout, but we have departures, arrivals, and approaches very intuitively in the order that you may need them. Since Pensacola is here, we could look and see what approaches they have, and they're listed right here in the order of preference with respect to minimums. Nearest, as the name implies, might be useful if you're having difficulties and needed to get on the ground for whatever reason. Distance, bearing, types of approaches, runway length, all right here, right for you. It's very intuitive, the best yet in the Garmin fleet. Waypoint information, that's attainable from this individual page and or by tapping in the flight plan. So if you have something in the flight plan, for example, and you want to know frequencies, you go to waypoint information's frequencies, and there they are. If you tap on the frequency, it's going to load it. If you tap on a COM frequency, it'll load it into the COM standby, and you can flip it up by tapping green. If it's an ILS frequency, it'll load it in the nav. Very intuitive. You can flip it up that way. This box here displays the nav frequencies, but it will default by itself back to COM. If in fact you're in one or the other and you want to be in the other, just press the end of the knob over on this side. COM, nav. Very intuitive. Music, if you're lucky enough to have the XM data link, you can put your favorite tunes there and have that available to you and to your passengers. Utilities. Unfortunately, the vertical calculation is hidden here in utilities, but it's very intuitive. You can set a target altitude. You can change it. That is, if there's a waypoint here, which happens to be an airport, from MSL to AGL, that you can tell it the profile you'd like to have, um, or the offset or the offset. So you might tell it you want to be pattern altitude 5 miles before the airport, something like that. And in the case of the airport, we might target for piston airplane 1,000. For turbine, we would target 1,500, 5 miles from the airport. Then it will display if the navigator is active, the vertical speed required currently, and how long until you should begin your descent if you wanted a particular rate. So that's a pretty nice feature. Also in utilities, we have flight timers, rain prediction, random autonomous integrity monitoring for the satellites, trip planning, fuel planning, and calculations such as wind speed direction. Also, there's a clean screen feature here in utilities, which allows you to clean the screen with a chamois while you're flying and preserve all of your flight planning and such. Press the home key, takes you right back to what was going on. Systems, as the name implies, has a variety of different things, including setup, a CDI, date, time, channel spacing, etc. And that's the overview for the Garmin. Now, what I'd like to do next is uh, take you through a few of the shortcuts, a few of the steps in a way that you would actually be using the navigator. So let's get started. From the home page, what we might be wanting to do is first, from the spot where we are on the ground, we might want to get the ATIS. So the engine may be started, or we may be working on the battery as you wish, but we would get the frequencies, load in the ATIS, flip it up, and use the audio panel to listen to the frequency. Next, we would load in clearance, and we would request for a clearance, copy and set the clearance into the panel. And next, of course, would be wanting ground. And before we call the ground, though, we might be putting the flight plan in, actually. So let's take a minute to do that. All right, so let's say that today we're on our way to Raleigh-Durham. And so the first event would be to put in the airport RDU, and those are the endpoints. And you're probably using ForeFlight or flightplan.com, and the route that ATC seems to be given is Crestview, the Tenney intersection, Buzzy 6, Raleigh. So if you didn't know how to spell those, you could easily get that information from ATC, but you could also get it from your iPad or what other planning tools you're using. So Crestview, we know, is CEW, and we want to insert that before. So CEW, enter. And then after Crestview, it's Tenney, and we'll insert before Raleigh since we tapped Raleigh. And Tenney is T like Tango, E like Echo, NNI. And we pick the E, double tap N, and then find the I. Tenney intersection, and then it's the Buzzy 6. Now, some of you may know that if you're loading an arrival, it might very well be that last intersection is on the arrival. So let's see. Transmission is Columbia. Columbia is not in our flight plan, but I'm betting, since Columbia is the only transition, that Tenny exists inside of Columbia. So let's load that arrival and see what it looks like. And sure enough, Columbia, Tenny, Sandhills, Buzzy, and Raleigh. So now we have just a little bit of editing to do. We want to take out the airport because that's down below. And we want to take out Tenny because that's also down below. Then we want to go down and take out Columbia because our clearance was Tenny. So it's Crestview, Tenny, and then the Buzzy 6, which is after Tenny, Sandhills, Buzzy, and then the airport. Now, we could also go ahead at this point and load the approach if we wanted, but my guess is that you may not know what they're using at this point, so we'll leave it at that. Once the approach is loaded, we'll know about fuel, we know distance, we know all the things we need to know. We can go to the trip computer to find that out as well. Now, one of the things that is really great about one of the many things really great about this product, this navigator, is that just about everything you want to do is you can customize. For example, here in the flight plan page, we have desired track and distance. Now, you may like that leg to leg distance, so we know it's 17 miles from Pensacola to CEW and so on. But this is a lot of math, I think. And so my preference would be to have a cumulative distance in there. And as fate would have it, that option is available to us here in Edit Data Fields under the menu. Now, the desired track I find useful for a number of reasons, just to make sure that the HSI is pointed in the right way, the course indicator. But the distance field, I prefer cumulative distance. Now, there are a couple of other options here, en route safe altitude, ETA, ETE, just like in the earlier navigators, but CUM is my personal favorite. So my objective here is to have the most amount of information available to me with the least amount of button pushing. And now we can see our distance to Raleigh is 553 nautical miles, which in a no wind or even a modest headwind is well within the range of any of the PA46 aircraft. All right, so here's a map of our route. From Crestview, it's pretty much direct going up to the Raleigh area. But let's make sure before we use the navigator that we're actually have it sequenced correctly. And you see here a magenta arrow just inside between KPNS and CEW. That arrow is exactly where we want it. That's exactly what we would like to have. We want this arrow here. This indicates that the flight plan route is engaged, that leg is active between PNS and CEW. So if we would like to look at the map to verify that, we can simply press and hold the home key and go back to the map, or press release the home key, and then zoom in to see what that leg looks like. And there's the active leg. So if the controller says intercept flight plan route or whatever, we're good to go there. We can do that very simply with nav and heading on the autopilot. So after the initial vectors, we're intercepting the flight plan route between Pensacola and Crestview VOR. And again, the confirmation there is found in the flight plan, where this is the magenta line on the map between PNS and Crestview. We see our distance from Crestview diminishing, and the desired track is 054, which if we were to check on the CDI, that's what the course needle should be indicating. If you don't have an EHSI, why then you have to go ahead and do the spin yourself. Now as we cross Crestview, the Garmin will sequence to the next active leg, which is between CEW and the next intersection. Again, that can be confirmed by checking the flight plan. And we see that it's 403 miles to Tenny, bearing 056. Since Tenny's part of the arrival, it exists underneath the arrival banner. No surprise there. Now we may have interest along the way of computing, checking the weather, computing the fuel burn. All this is capable. This navigator is capable of all those things with the utilities. So fuel planning, trip planning. Trip planning is more for planning the next leg and or the next flight. If you're having a fuel stop and going to be moving on, you can give it some data and tell it where you're going and plan the next leg or the next flight. Fuel planning, as the name implies, will give you an opportunity to use sensor data. Again, the Meridian and the piston versions of the PA46 have this capability elsewhere, and it's probably better. It's all computed in the glass panel, so some of this density, altitude, true airspeed, winds calculations. So this computer is capable of doing it, but it is redundant for the PA46 pilot. So really not a whole lot to do here. One thing that might be useful is calculating the vertical descent. Now some of the approaches, or the arrivals I should say, are going to have an expectation for the descent, and so this would be a good time to research that. If you have NEXRAD XM weather available, including METARs and TAFs, you might want to check on the METAR, see what the winds are doing, assume what runway might be in use and which one you might prefer, and then calculate the descents based on the runway. Otherwise, you can use a general approach of just planning on being 1,500 feet above the waypoint in the piston airplane, 500 feet a minute, and in the turbine I'm going to recommend 1,000 feet a minute for the standard descent. 5 miles before destination is going to be, of course, the airport, Raleigh. And in this case, we'll be beginning our descent in 27 minutes 55 seconds. If we were to start down now, we'd want to start down at about 400 feet a minute. These are simply calculations based on the ground speed. So if the wind speed should change, why then this number here will change. The Garmin 650 Navigator also displays weather, of course, and will also give you all of the features that you're expected to get with such a box. There is an opportunity to put a map pointer on here. You can also flick, press and drag with your finger and see various fixes. If we wanted to know more about this intersection, we could tap on the intersection. It would take us to the waypoint page. Back takes us back. This is all pretty intuitive. Once we get done with a buzzy approach, we're probably going to want to know about which runway. So let's take a minute to consider that. Now the airport at Raleigh has a couple of excellent FBOs. If we were to go to the flight plan and choose Raleigh, check on waypoint information, we'd have a bunch of information about what's going on. We can look at the runways and see that if we were landing to the northeast, we're probably going to get the southern runway 05 right, since the FBOs are here in the middle, in between the two, and this is the shorter of the two runways. So runway 5 right is 7,500 feet by 150 and full-time lighting, so that's all pretty good information there. Your ForeFlight's going to have your charts, and recommend we consider then 5 right. Procedure for 5 right, the approach is going to be the ILS probably, and that's actually a pretty good approach. So with that in mind, we'll anticipate that by loading the approach. So we can go to procedures right from here, choose 5 right, and we can load the approach. We can load vectors to final, which is what we just did, or better yet, if we were to load the full approach, if we were to load the full approach, we do a better job with that. So let's go back, select transition. Looks like there's only one other than vectors, Peckett. So if we load that full approach, we'll be able to see on the map what that's like. Now, unlike prior navigators, we can go over to the approach and zoom in on it and see the whole thing, which is pretty nifty. But at this point, as the airplane gets closer, say within 60, 60 miles or so, we should endeavor to get the ATIS and be ready with the approach that they're offering, if in fact that's one we want to accept. All right, so now in planning for the approach at Raleigh, we're going to take a quick look at the chart here and just kind of look it over, see that it is indeed an ILS, so we don't forget to set it up correctly. There's some non-standard takeoff and arrival minimums, so approach minimums, so we want to research that if the weather's low. The Mauser, the lighting system, is available to us as a half a mile long unless it's no-tammed out, and so our frequencies are there. Next, we'll want to look at the plan view, and the plan view is showing us that the approach starts at Peckett here, just straight out from the runway. We'll use a red pen for this one, and so it's right there. My feeling on this is that we should always load the full approach unless we're being cleared for the visual, in which case vectors to final is fine. But this way, at least we have a way to get to the initial approach fix if we need to. Now, since we're expecting the vectors, we definitely will want to arrive at the approach at the right time, at the right altitude. So the arrival is going to bring us probably down to, I don't know, 4,000 or so. But let's check that first. All right, so according to ForeFlight, a chart there, it's 3,000 at Sand Hills. So the approach starts here at Peckett at 4. So as soon as we start talking to approach control, we might want to say, ask for direct Peckett or Peckett, and then ask for the straight in. Now, since there is no procedure turn drawn here, of course, there's no procedure turn to do, and this is the Terpster's way of saying not only do you not have to do a procedure turn, but you may not. Also here in the plan view, it says radar required. Well, what does that mean? Well, that we got a color weather radar on the airplane. Is that what it's about? No. Radar required means that you can't get there from here. In other words, it simply means that there won't be any getting on this approach without radar, and emergencies notwithstanding. So if you were cleared direct PESIT cleared for the approach, that would be adequate today, because if you're coming in, no matter which way you're coming from, um, there's no PT. So we just come in and go on about our airborne mission. So cross Peckett 4000, maintain 4000 till established. You're cleared for the ILS runway 5 right. That's how it'll sound. So let's have another quick look at the map. All right, so we see Peckett on there, and there's just this funny little line here that takes us over to the airport first. That's kind of strange. But if ever that happens, if ever you see something that doesn't look right, so this line goes all the way into the airport and then back out again, and then it also goes out this way. So that's a bit of a conundrum. Let's see if we can figure out what that's all about. Easiest way to do that is simply go back to the home page, flight plan, and then let's look at it. So clearly, once we get down to Raleigh, uh, we go back out from the VOR here at Raleigh. We're asked to go back out um, from Raleigh. We're asked to go back out to the approach, and that's what's making that extra line. Then after the approach, we're asked to go out to the missed approach point, which is making that other line. So that's the reason for the extra lines. For now, yeah, I'm okay with that. In other words, we wouldn't want to necessarily mess with that, but um, we should just be advised that that's the reason for that. It's also true that it's messing up the fuel bingo. So if we want accurate fuel information, we might want to change it. So after the Buzzy intersection, we might want to go to Peckett. That's likely to be what we're cleared to do, but I caution you about changing a flight plan without having a clearance to do so. You'd have to be right on top of it, but I'm okay with it. So I'm going to suggest that we look at what happens after we get to Buzzy. I'm going to suggest we take the Raleigh VOR out, and now this flight plan is going to look a lot more intuitive. So we can look out here a little bit. Columbia's out of it. We might be asked to go to Columbia. You've got a rubber banding feature here. You can put your finger on the fix. I'm having a little trouble with the screen here doing it, but there is an ability to rubber band this and bring it over there. So after Tenney, Sand Hills, Buzzy, and then well, Peckett is gone, so we have to check that out. All right, so let's see what happened to Peckett. Looks like it's in here. It might just be we haven't ranged in enough. Sure enough, there it is. So there's Peckett, and then the runway. So that all looks good. Now let's change the scenario a little while we're on our way in here. Let's say that it's a real busy day and you really are going to get the vectors to final, and this is abundantly clear because it says radar required right on the chart. So there isn't going to be any, well, the radar's down, so you're on your own. There won't be any of that today. So what we want to do now is, if the weather's good, you have the airport in sight, we're told cleared for the visual approach, or we see we really are getting vectors, those are two options. Now, so one of the things that I find important when that happens is to keep the awareness of the other fixes. So rather than activate vectors to final, I recommend that you come down here and activate the leg that you're pretty sure you're going to get, and that's going to be the leg just outside of the final. So if we activate Peckett to Permi, that will make that leg active, that area uh, from the place where we're going direct now to Permi. So if we get vectored off of that route and get turned back in, it will for sure be outside of the final approach fix, which is the leg we've just activated. Let's see how that looks on the map. Now the airplane is en route, and you can see that the magenta line that the airplane is on is gone. So what we need to do is just find the destination and look and see what we've activated. And in fact, we've activated the final approach leg. The rest of it's all still in, but this is with the assumption that we're going to be brought in on a 30-degree or less vector, something like this, or over here perhaps. We don't really know. I'm guessing it won't be on the northwest side of the field because they have a parallel runway, so it's more likely going to be here. Keep in mind that since it's an ILS, this is really an exercise in position awareness and has nothing to do with what the airplane will do once it's operating on the localizer. For now, we're still in GPS mode, and so whatever we activate or do here is what the airplane is going to do. So if we're going to activate a leg, we have to have heard the H word heading so that the airplane is actually tracking the way the ATC wants us to. Now, if it should come to pass that we do get the visual, we report the airport site cleared for the visual, then this depiction isn't as good. What we probably would rather have is the magenta line going straight out. So if we go back to flight plan, and we can select the approach, we find the approach banner, we can click on it and activate vectors to final. If we activate the approach, since the whole approach is loaded, we're going to be given direct Peckett, which is what we were doing a minute ago. But anytime you activate a full approach, it's the same as going direct, present position direct to the initial approach fix. But if we're getting if we're getting the vectors, or correction, we have the airport in sight and we want to activate vectors to final, we can do it here from the approach banner. We can also do it from the procedure page, activate vectors to final right here. Once we've activated the vectors to final, we can look at it on the map and see how it looks. And that's how it looks. So the magenta line is a little longer and gives us a little more guidance and a little more time to get in on the final approach course. So you know how it is when you're looking out there, you can see the runway, but you might not know exactly which one is yours. Now we can set ourselves up on a self-imposed heading and then arm the approach, or correction, arm the nav, and have the GPS take us right in this way, and then we can take responsibility for the vertical navigation using 300 feet per nautical mile as our standard VDP. So if we're 5 miles from the runway, we ought to be at 1500 feet AGL. Now let's take another scenario. Let's say that that Raleigh has a problem. They had an accident of some sort, and the runway is closed. Now what we're having to do is to deviate um, or divert to some other runway. And I don't know, maybe it's going to be 5 Whiskey 8. You know, might be an airport without a tower, might be someplace you don't know very well, but you can find it pretty easily. In this case, it's Siler City. All I did was cover it with the cursor and then hit direct. So we get waypoint information. We get get it into the flight plan. Um, we could uh, just find nearest. Well, if we're up there already, um, we've chosen this. We could just look at it. So if we click on the airport, 5 Whiskey 8 is Siler City. Um, we can enter it, and then there it is. We have everything we need to know right there. All right, so we've checked out 5 Whiskey 8. We've decided that that's our best option. And again, the way to do that is to get waypoint information. So we have runways, we have all the information we want. 5,000 feet, plenty wide. Now all we have to do is tap direct and activate, and the airplane's going directly to the airport. Now we're still plenty far away, but if we were closer, we would want to know immediately what the runways are. And again, waypoint, runways. In this case, it's runway 422. So I'm going to suggest runway 4. But how would we line up with that runway? All we have right now is a map taking us directly uh, to the airport with no runway alignment. Well, you may remember if you press and hold the home key, it takes us to this primary nav page. We can select the CDI VLOC, but that won't do any good. We want to use the GPS to get there. If we choose OBS, put in 040, that'll give us a runway alignment on our way to that particular airport. You go back to the map, now we can see what that alignment looks like, even a safe distance from the runway. We can now come on to that line and adequately navigate um, to the alternate airport, even though it has no approaches. So we can use heading, a combination of heading and nav, to take us to 5 Whiskey 8 on a runway heading, which we already discussed as 040. Once we get lined up on that heading, then we can use the vertical profile of 300 feet per nautical mile. And that's going to get us a glide slope type descent. So just rough order of magnitude, when we're looking down here below the box now, when we're flying along and we get to a point which is 5 miles away, we need to be at 1,500 feet, and this is obstacles notwithstanding. So you could use terrain avoidance or visually separate ourselves from terrain and obstacles. But when we get to that spot, we want to start down at 500 feet a minute, and if we do, we will arrive at that runway just as pretty as you please. So 300 feet per nautical mile is the VDP. Just as pretty as you please. Now changing the scenario again. So now we've landed at Raleigh, and we've landed on 5 right. We're rolling out. All we need to do is set the cursor over the Raleigh airport and then continuously tap the in button, and we'll get enough resolution out of this little geosynchronous delight that we'll be able to turn off at the proper moment. This is a hot spot right here, this magenta circle, And then Raleigh also has something called taxi spots. If you've not run into those yet, well, frankly, I'm not seeing them on this one, but there occasionally you'll see on the official charts spot 1, spot 2, and you'll hear aircraft being asked to taxi to spot 1 or spot 2 or whatever. In this case, we'd be rolling out and leaving. Usually, when we happen to know when you go in there, they're going to give you a left turn off of the 5 right runway, and then ask you to taxi via Delta, which is here, Juliet, and then into the general aviation ramp. Let's see if I can zoom this in a little bit and make this a little more obvious. That's as far as it goes. So yep, so taxiing in Alpha 7 Juliet 2 into either Landmark or TAC Air there at Raleigh. And so the Navigator will do all of those things for you. We've explored OBS, we've explored the use of the GPS, and we didn't speak much about the ILS, but if we're flying actually an ILS, of course, we'd switch to VLOC and press the button, the knob, push in on the knob over here, and that switches us to nav, and then we can load whatever frequency by pressing the green. So you see the little flip-flop switch there. It's maybe a little hard to see, but right here is a white switch that indicates a flip-flop capability. So we'd be pushing on that switch to move the frequencies from one place to the other, like so. All right, so let's say now we're leaving out of Raleigh. We've landed at Raleigh. We've had a wonderful time there in the Raleigh area, and now we're departing. If you have saved your flight plan, why, it's an easy thing simply to invert it. So if we were to go to the flight plan page and see that the flight plan is still in there, we could tap menu and invert the active flight plan. Yes, so now we're going back to PNS. Obviously this isn't correctly sequenced, but we're all about it. Oh, well, okay, so it dropped Raleigh out, so we had to put Raleigh back in. So we want to insert before CEW. We want to put in KRDU. Enter. And now then we'd like probably to have a departure out of there. I'm going to say, let's say we're assigned to Tar Heel 7. We can load a procedure, and it knows we're talking about Raleigh because I had touched Raleigh before I asked for the procedure. We could ask it for a departure, go down here to the Tar Heel 7, and then know that we're departing on the same runway we came in on, and the transition we want probably is Charleston, and we load the departure. So there it is, off of runway 5 right, heading 053, vectors Raleigh, so on and so on. So we can set that up so we're actually doing what we're supposed to do. So we set this up here. After vectors, we can go Raleigh, activate it, and that'll take us there from the airplane. Of course, the airplane isn't where it's supposed to be, so that magenta line isn't making a whole lot of sense. But if in fact the airplane were at Raleigh, that would be better. So if the airplane were here, that line would make more sense. Right here. if we want to sequence, by the way, I haven't showed you this, but I could do it now. If we want to sequence to the next fix, we can simply come down here and click on Rosbo and ask to activate the leg. And now on the map that will tend to make more sense. Right there. Loading the departures is just that easy. If we get down to Crestview and get assigned an airway or something, or at any point really, just go to the flight plan, click on the VOR, and click on Load Airway, and it'll give you the choice of all the airways, Victor Airways and jet routes that go through that particular VOR. You select the one that you're assigned and then pick the jump off point. It's just that simple. You can load it, preview it. That's obviously not the one we want, but you see how that goes. Well, now we've covered quite a bit of information in this video. I hope it's been helpful. There's much more, so recommend if you have interest in the 650, 750 series equipment, you should go online to the Garmin website, download the user manuals, including the cockpit reference guide, which is a huge advantage, and enjoy it. I do recommend that you read and study that which interests you and seek excellent training. And there is one last comment that I'd like to make. Some of the 650s are getting into the fleet. The side tones aren't properly adjusted, and or the brightness is the auto brightness feature is either too bright or too dim. Both of those settings are settable. The side tone refers to how you hear yourself when you key the mic, not the volume of the audio panel, but when you key the mic, do you hear yourself in the headset too loudly, not loudly enough, or just right? That's called side tone. Before you power up the Garmin, press and hold the home button and then power it up while you're holding the home button. Once the unit powers up, let the home button go and you'll be in the setup mode, which will give you the opportunity to arrow down. You're going to want to look for the calm feature, and then in there you'll see side tone, and there's also one there for brightness, and you can adjust that to your heart's content. Plus 65 dB is too loud, plus 30 is probably going to be too low, so recommend plus 45 as a starting point. If it isn't set there, then consider that as a setting. So that's it for the Garmin 650. I hope this is helpful. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to contact me directly. This is Dick Rochfort, Master Instructor, Pilot Trainer for the PA46. Fly safely, train often.